Hi, I'm Karen Hurd, and I'm here with our next edition of Asking for a Friend Live. And we're talking about how do you show up with confidence. And I am delighted today to be joined by my friend Hilary Blair, who is the CEO of Articulate. And she is all about this, and I love this, owning the awkward. And we all have a lot of awkward going on right now. I think we can use all the help we can get. So here's the thing, Hilary. I have been saving up all these questions, knowing that we were going to have this conversation. So I'm really looking forward to talking with you.
Great.
So I've got, let's just start. Let's just jump right in. I have so many. My boss tells me that I need to project more confidence in meetings. How do I do that?
My first instinct is to ask more questions, right? So I'm like, what does that mean? What's going on? Asking you to speak, or are you listening? Are you part of a team? Are you one person? So tons of questions go through my head. And then I go to the sort of groundwork of what we talk about with confidence. Are you really needing to show more confidence? That's what they're labeling it. Or do you need to simply embrace the fact that it's often uncomfortable? We are convoluting those words so often now, where we have this idea that we're telling people they need more confidence. And honestly, if we simply know, along with the awkward, that things are uncomfortable, and if we can separate comfort from confidence, recognize that any meeting that my boss might be in is super uncomfortable. And then I can go, okay, my mouth's dry, my hands want to move around, my thoughts aren't coming. Oh, I'm uncomfortable. I still have the confidence. I still know why I was hired. I still rock what I'm talking about. All right, so in that case, let me exhale. So that's one thing, exhale, because we need oxygen to get into our blood, to get to our brain, so we have coherent, beautiful things to say. When we get nervous and we hold our breath, then our brain doesn't get the oxygen it needs. We don't have the great thoughts. We're in fight, flight, freeze, faint, all the F's. So if we're like, oh, super uncomfortable. I heard some people talking about this, and that's okay. I think that idea of getting comfortable being uncomfortable is permeating many discussions around the globe right now. So to project more confidence, exhale. Own the fact that you may be shaking and feeling weird. Trust that you still know what you're talking about. Make eye contact. And be succinct in what you're sharing.
Oh, I love it. Very, very good. All right, let's go to the next one.
All right.
I'm a woman working with a lot of men. Sometimes I get feedback that I'm too pushy, but I don't think I'm actually doing anything different than the guys. What should I do? Hilary, I got to tell you, I hear this one like every single week. People ask me this question. So I'm bringing it to you.
All right. And then I'm going to bring it right back to you. The first thing I mention is that there's the world we live in and the world we would like to live in. In the world we live in, it's not a level playing field. That's the obvious thing, right? So yes, people are doing the same things as other people, not even in the gender realm. I will say something, someone thinks it's sarcastic, someone else says the exact same thing I said, and they're like, amazing. That's so heartfelt. And I'm like, I just said that. So to give a level set that it's not always male and female, that we show up in different packages. And then let's come to the fact that, yes, there is a sense that when women come up strong, direct, that we can use those words. Let's say we use those words for a male colleague, woman, pushy, too forward. And we often put the TOO in front of that, right? Too much, too bossy, too. That's part of our culture, and it really is for us to call ourselves on it. Because I would ask the women also, are you noticing that you respond differently to the women on your team when they speak up that way. So we have to work on retraining how we respond before anything comes out of our mouth. So yes, to the woman who said she's showing up pushy, I'm not doing anything different. I'm sure you're not. And how do you still get heard without giving away your power, without diminishing your power, without doing some weird thing to show up in that way? I invite allies to be there. So we get to be allies. So Karen, you say something and I can tell that someone thought it was pushy. And I'm like, I thought that was really clear. That was really clear and direct, Karen. Thank you for that. We have to bolster the new frame for what we're hearing and how we're responding and help your message be held that way. When we get told we're pushy, which is the shadow of strength, we may not be in the shadow of one of our major skills at all. They are seeing that because of tradition, because of what they're used to being told for how women should show up. How do we, when we hear that, maintain our awkwardness, our sense of competence, our belief in our own confidence, and then without feeling like we're selling out, we call it double defining it. Can we define it in another way that they can hear and then invite them into that without feeling irritated, angry, that they don't get it? Because sometimes when we hear that, we load the next comment with the barb because they're wrong. And then it gets messy versus recognizing we're dealing with some old habits, and habits are created to succeed. And someone was succeeding by seeing that I needed to be quieter. How do I embrace that? Recognize I need to shift it, stay in dialogue, not go into monologue and kind of preach at them, and stay present. So yeah, that might be direct. I'm hearing that direct is what I'm being asked to bring to you. Is there another way that would be helpful to define that? But I can't sound sarcastic, which is super hard for smart leaders. Well, what do you think? I mean, there's some thoughts, Karen. What do you think of that?
No, it's really interesting because I'm building a executive presence program for National Women's Day, right? And they put on the title, how do you be more aggressive or assertive? And I said, how about we change that to how do we be more influential?
Great.
Because one of the things that I have found, and this is so interesting to me as a kid, I was in one of my very first jobs, and I had a senior vice president say to me, Karen, when you enter a room, your personality is so big that it's intimidating. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, I'm 20 years younger than the other peers in this room. How in the world? Because I was not feeling even very confident. And she said, you can't even help it. Your just personality is so big that you need to be aware of that. And you need to figure out what is going to be most effective. And so for you, I think you don't need to worry about projecting the confidence as much as you need to say, sometimes you should lower your voice, lower your volume, change the pace. It was such great advice for me. Okay. I was way more influential, showing up less assertive. So I think it's a matter of experimenting with and watching the reactions and asking for feedback is something that I also encourage folks to do.
Yes. And you style shifted at that time. And we have to recognize that we aren't just one way. We have so many ways to communicate. You heard that. It didn't shut you down, I don't think. I'm still, the coach in me came out and I'm like, Karen, want to make sure you didn't get squished, right? So that idea is you style shift. Okay, I can use a different tone. I can use a different loudness. I can show up in a room listening more. Yes. And I also want you, Karen, to your 20 years ago self, to be able to be that buoyant, vivacious person and not squish it so that it pops out other places. So style shifting, yes. And I still want that energy. Right. Intimidating is a word that is a major squelcher. It just shuts people down. And it puts the burden on you. You intimidated. And I do my coaching too, say, why were you intimidated? So I'm coaching the other person. So what about her showing up in the room was intimidating to you? New and foreign and different. She comes in with confidence and light and energy. How can you, as a leader, yes and her, not need her to change and shift for you? So there is that idea of remaining in dialogue. And what you did, super important. You have to have all those tools. And you have added more and more tools to your tool chest. And when you shared it with me, it didn't sound angry or like you had to give up part of yourself. You go, no, I can do that. So that yes and attitude is awesome.
Yeah, I do. I think it was very helpful advice.
Yeah.
So choosing, you're saying what is appropriate for this particular situation, and not assuming that, everybody needs the same thing. And so how do you, David always says, how do you be effective? Not necessarily, you could be right or you could be effective. What do you really want here? And you're effective.
Great. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so good. So we've got some comments coming in, and I also encourage you if you're listening and you have some questions, please, we'll love to answer your questions. So, oh boy, this is so common, strong women. I like that Hilary is looking at this from the real world. It's a fine line, being humble yet honest. Old habits are tough to shift from. Yeah, thanks so much, Shelley.
Yeah.
Okay, how do I show up confident when I'm actually not feeling all that confident?
And there, I would ask the question, are you really not feeling confident, or are you feeling insecure? Are you having some self-doubt? As they say, self-doubt is a super important quality to have. Go, wait a minute, is this the right answer? Am I the best at this? So confidence, I feel like, has this strong maintaining level. You are a confident person. You might have self-doubt about the answer. And the reason I go there and talk about being uncomfortable and the difference between insecure and self-doubt is that building your confidence back up, to me, feels like a really tall mountain. It's like I have to climb back up to get the confidence. If I'm like, oh, I'm having a little bit of self-doubt, that's a moment. And I can deal with that, and I can use it as a super successful person. We should have that coming in. If you are that powerful leader, you should have some self-doubt. You should be checking in with your team, right? What's going on? So I would suggest you're probably not feeling lack of confidence. What you might be feeling is uncomfortable, a little bit of insecurity about what's going on, and maybe a little self-doubt. Words are worlds. Karen, you just a moment ago did a beautiful reframing of language, right? How do we have influence versus being pushy, direct? Language matters. And that reframing of words, and some people can be like, just words. You're like, yeah, it matters. Does someone like you or they love you? Makes a difference.
I think that's so interesting because it can be a downward spiral. Immediately you start labeling yourself as, I'm not a confident person, then you start to see that emerging everywhere. But if you say, in this one moment, I was feeling insecure or I was doubting my ability, that's a totally different conversation.
In your head, which is where we're hanging out. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So David is saying, my friend is the one who is often intimidated by the louder and more boisterous folks in the room. Any tips on overcoming the discomfort to speak up and be heard?
Main thing, I think we overrate being comfortable. So I don't think we have to overcome discomfort. I read one whole book about confidence and speaking up. And in my own head, I just went through and I put in uncomfortable instead of losing confidence. And I think that if we can rock the awkward, well, not awkward, and understand that we will shake, we'll feel weird, especially if there are louder people in the room, louder in more of a broad sense, louder in so many different ways, body language, words, energy. The second half of that, being heard. And that is the part that I find is harder for the quieter folks. And I really work on the louder folks to make room. Yeah. I think it has we're in dialogue together. How do we notice what we're working on to make space for people? I'm working with a trio right now, and quietly one of the people has mentioned that they often feel like they get spoken over or they don't get heard in other areas. And every time I leave the conversation with them, I'm like, did I speak over her? Because I'm an external processor. So I'm like, right? And did I leave space for her? That's on me. So this person, tip of overcoming, I'm a big fan of getting allies in the room. So making sure that you have someone help you and say, hey, I think friend has something to say, so that we're picking up on those things with each other. Allow yourself to be awkward. Allow your heart to race, your palms to sweat. Allow yourself to feel super weird and be sure that everyone's noticing that. Know that you have something to say. Start it again. Don't be perfect. Messy. Humans are messy. I do sports analogies, Karen. I know you're an athlete, right? That idea that I'm not picturing some Olympic athlete, no heart racing, totally calm at the top of a mogul run. No, they're amped up, they're ready. They are aware of and using their energy. They aren't wasting time getting calm. They are riding that adrenaline, using the adrenaline.
So would you encourage people to find and ask for allies? So
Yeah.
if you're working on something, it'd be because you could say, well, that would be great. I'd love to have an ally, but I don't have an ally.
Right, totally. Yes. I talk about it a lot because I think in the world that I've been exploring in the corporate world for the last, 15, 20 years, I come from the theater world where we don't even know how to do anything alone. I mean, here I am in our studio. I got a whole team here, right? I don't even know how to do anything alone. So we are, and the virtual world kind of invites that, right? The producer energy. We're also getting feedback all the time. That is feedback and support to be better towards the end goal versus feedback about whether you get to keep your job. There's a different energy. So people get into these silos, these solo mindsets. And I have been inviting, how do you be there for each other? How do you notice? How do you learn to notice what's going on without it being negative feedback? Be like, hey, I think if this is what was happening, we'd hear you more. How do we yes and each other? How do we invite that?
I love
Yes.
that.
And how do we be open to that? I think we're not great at receiving feedback. I just did an article on that because I think we're trained so hard how to give feedback that people just go like this. Okay, give it to me. Whatever you got. And I think that keeps us from partnering. If I'm in a room with you, Karen, I want to know that you're like, yeah, Hilary has something to say. Or I'm like, oh, Karen has that. I just saw Karen's head move. I want to hear what she has to say. Because we do little things, right? That I have something in this virtual world, especially.
Yeah, and I think if you know you've got a habit you're working on, to ask someone to help you. I was working, and I wasn't there to be her coach. I was working on strategic planning work with this organization, but I was finding that this woman, who was the only woman in the room consistently, she was the only female member of the executive team, she would start things like, well, this is probably a dumb idea. In my feeble little mind, Joe really, he's much better at math than me. And I'm like, we just have to cut that part off, because what she said after that was always brilliant. But she had no idea. And so it was one of these things where I had said, you didn't hire me to be your coach, but are you interested in my observations here?
Yes.
Because I'm watching their faces when you do that. And that's when all these negative things start to happen.
That diminishing language, we think, makes us more humble, shows us, we show up as not pushy, not direct. We feel like if we put that little preamble, that little runway first, I don't know, this is maybe a good idea. It's something I heard, could work. Take it or leave it. Like all those things we do are a way of making it softer for our freaking brilliance to come through. We have learned that when we share that brilliant moment, that brilliant thought, that idea, some people can go, whoa, is that coming from her? So we've added in all these elements. So Karen, you started your career young and you were a rocket ship, right? So young, you learned to back off and make it easier for those who are older to see that brilliance coming through in you. You made it easier for them. And then what I also noticed with confidence, with showing up, is that we don't necessarily tailor our communication as we change and grow. Great feedback for that woman as for diminishing language, and also notice that, is it still fitting? I was working with a woman in her 50s a number of years ago, and she was doing all kinds of things like this. And she realized this was left over from when she was in her 20s. And maybe it worked then. We create habits to make it easier for people to receive what we have to share. We don't create habits to sabotage ourselves. So it worked in the moment, but it probably needed to be removed by the time she gets to her 50s. We're wanting her to show up with that strength.
Interesting.
And honor our habits. Like, why am I doing this? If I'm talking with Karen and all of a sudden I go here, why? Why am I covering myself up? Yeah, asking questions. I get so excited. Sorry, Karen, those are thoughts coming in there.
I got more.
Yeah, good.
So this one I'm really curious as your thoughts on, because you have been at this for a very long time, and most of the work I imagine was in a pre-COVID world where a lot of your interaction was face-to-face. And,
yes.
Now, how do you show up with confidence and influence in a virtual environment? What practical tips do you have for there? I've been pondering this question of what's the equivalent of a firm handshake, in this environment?
That idea of eye contact and the completely counterintuitive world of the virtual. I'm looking at you. Not at all. I'm looking at a camera. I'm looking at you. So sometimes I say, talk to the camera, listen to the box. Talk to the camera, listen to the box. And when we're having really intense conversations and really want to connect, I want to go here and reach through to you. So that is completely counterintuitive to what's effective. And that idea of open body language makes a big difference. And we don't even realize we're doing it sometimes. In person, you can see it, and that may have a greater impact. It changes things. If I put my hands in my lap underneath a table and I suggest an idea to you, it's different than I have my hands on the table and I suggest an idea to you. And here you can see it. Even if you can't, I'm different. I feel different when I have them here versus here. So that firm handshake is eye contact, having your camera on. Here's the thing though, Karen, is we can't be fully present all day long. We will have no energy, none. So we have to be intentional. When do I need to have a firm handshake and connect and be really present for someone? And when can I back off a bit? And be aware that if I even back off by sitting in my chair and kind of sitting back, totally changes the energy with you, right? This is like, I don't know, a little more arrogant. I mean, it could be, right? It could come across. So, but if I'm here all day long, I'll have nothing to move to the next room to go home at the end of the day.
Right. Yeah, I do. That where do you look thing has been really, it's been a journey, and so, when we're doing something like this, I agree. Yeah. I'm looking at the camera. I am not seeing your face. But when I'm having an intimate, an intimate conversation, I think, I was talking to a president yesterday, and I'm like, you know what, I have to look at them, and some of the time I have to look at them because I needed to see their face.
Totally.
He was upset. He had stuff to share, right? Like I needed. So I think that's the balance, to not always be perfect looking into the camera.
No.
When are you really listening? And
being transparent. So what we'll coach, I was working with Me Too with he was a VP, and so not a president, but a VP, and huge, really tough message. And he's like, I need to look at people. I go, I know you do, but that doesn't read. What that reads is you're avoiding them. So if it's a big group, here, right? And then I ask him to be transparent. I'm going to look at you here, and I need to look at all of you in your boxes. So being transparent is part of the key thing in the virtual world.
I like that. I'm
announcing it. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. That's really good. Okay. We ready for a couple more?
Always.
All right. We already kind of did this one with David's question. So I'm going to skip to, I have a very competent team member on my team, but she lacks confidence to share her ideas. So again, I know now I kind of get a sense of where you're headed with this, but go for it. How do you coach someone who is showing up to appears like they don't have confidence or they're not willing to speak up?
Yep. I would practice. I'm a big fan of sandbox practice. Let's try it because it takes a few little, like let's diving or anything athletic. I want to come at it a few times. What does that feel like? I need to feel it in my muscle memory. We can do all we want in our head. If I haven't practiced looking at someone and saying, here's my idea, that is one of our big things. I mean, why coaching matters, right? Is we get to try it on. That is so different than reading something or even here, watching this. Like, after you hear this, now say, hey, can we practice it? Can you hop on a Zoom? Will you hop on a Zoom call with me and help me practice this? So take the time, awkward as it is, super awkward, to help a teammate go through that. So yes.
All right. I love that. That's really good. I'm a big believer in role play too. Okay. I know that you write and speak a lot about imposter syndrome. So as we're wrapping up, I'd just like to get your sense of, what do you, I mean, it's so real. I mean, it's such a real thing. What do you do if you are feeling like you're in over your head or you're not as good as people think you are?
Right. So many things wrapped into imposter syndrome. And I read about it and talk about it. I have colleagues who are major experts in that realm. The main thing I want to say is it tends to be more cultural. Like, we are creating a culture where we aren't supporting people to feel, and not even feel, to know they are awesome, even if they, five other thoughts just dropped in my head. If they're not feeling as competent as they could be. The problem is there are some people who move through our same workspace who aren't as competent as they think they are. So that happens too. So the imposter syndrome, we're finding, and if you read on it, the idea is we're labeling people having it. And here's the other thing. Syndrome, we talk about women a lot, not only women, but imposter feels like you've done something wrong, right? That feels like bad. And then syndrome sounds like an illness. So we've given it this name that sounds so wrong. It's a real thing. And some of it's culture, talking about bias, what we are missing with our unconscious bias. And then there's a whole area where it's more self-doubt, it's insecurity. And we want to be careful that we're not using the idea of imposter syndrome as a blanket statement to, shock value, up level. You're going to get a lot of comments on this from people now. So the idea is I want to make sure we're not using the term for everything. We're recognizing that it is a real syndrome, and usually it has to do with the culture. It's not about the individual. When it's the individual, there's insecurity and self-doubt and that sense of I'm feeling super awkward. When we have a culture that is not supporting the different competencies, then we are seeing that we are having this, I get the imposter syndrome. And then the other flip of it is, are we having some overconfident people who really don't have the competence they're talking about? So we just opened a Pandora's box. Yeah, there you go. So,
I think, just one of the things that's been helpful to me is to get that almost everybody feels that at some point. At sometimes I'll be on a stage, there'll be 2,000 people and I'll be like, oh, wait, how did I get here? And is what I'm going to say really going to make a difference for these folks? And, those questions, no matter how many times you do it, sometimes pop in. And one of the things that's been helpful, being part of the National Speakers Association, talking to other speakers, and they're like, yeah, that happens. That's real.
So, and I would ask you, is that imposter syndrome, or is that self-doubt? Or is that feeling insecure in the moment? And that's a whole discussion, and I'm reading on it all the time and working with people. And I would say that there were times in your career, because you traveled through a male-dominated career, right? Excuse me. And I would say that at times it was coming in. I would invite you, though, when you're up on the stage with amazing information, I would honor you for having some self-doubt, because then it matters to you that what you have is of value to the people who are about to listen. And that means you care. That means you are aware enough to go, okay, I've been doing this, but I want to make sure I'm hitting all these people, or at least half. Yeah. So different times in your career, maybe, and recognizing not to use that as a bucket for everything, to really allow the different words to live and the different ideas to live at different moments.
Beautiful. Okay, Hilary, we're running out of time. So I just want to see, is there any last pieces of wisdom that you'd love to leave with our audience here today?
I invite us to be awkward and understand that we can be confident and competent and awkward and be an ally for others. Speak up in the meetings for others.
Perfect. Hilary, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. Keep up your fabulous work. Thank you.
So that we are delighted. Our next live session is going to be on March 19th, and we have a special Women's History Month edition. A couple of really fabulous senior executives who have done a tremendous job with their career and a tremendous job with their families, talking about the challenges. So we hope that you will join us then. And next week's session is going to be about very practical tools for what people really need in their one-on-one meetings. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.